If you want to know the secrets of existence and the true meaning of life, I can't help you. But if you want some book recommendations, why not try reading the ones I wrote? If you're a fan of giant monster mayhem and anime weirdness, why not try Operation Red Dragon: The Daikaiju Wars Part 1? If horror is more your style, you can't go wrong with The Occult Mafia. Those who enjoy their fantasy with a dark twist may be interested in Emerald of Maddox City. And if you're interested in shared universes, why not read all three? Hop on down to the description for links to all 3 books on Amazon. Enjoy whichever ones you read, and enjoy the video.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and there was a pretty big announcement made regarding the future of the MonsterVerse recently, as well as a rumor attached to it which has already spiraled wildly out of control, and I once again feel the need to step in and tell everyone to calm down. So first the announcement, and this much we know is true. The Hollywood Reporter stated that Legendary is already entering talks with Adam Wingard to come back for the next MonsterVerse movie, which, if he agrees to it, would make him the first director to return in the MonsterVerse. Granted, there have only been like 4 movies at this point, each with 1 director, so that doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. This wouldn't be like, say, if the MCU announced Kenneth Branagh was suddenly coming back for another Thor movie after years had passed and other people had taken over. And of course, every single director, I'm pretty sure, has stated they'd want to come back at some point. Maybe not Gareth Edwards, because he returned to the indie circuit very quickly after directing Rogue One. I think he kind of got scared off by how intensive the process is in Hollywood and just would prefer to stick with indie movies. But all the same, Michael Dougherty and Jordan Vogt-Roberts have also expressed their interest in returning. It's just that Adam Wingard is the first one that's definitely being approached to come back, and that's because Godzilla vs. Kong is such a wild success. So, who knows? I think he did a good job directing this movie. I do also think that maybe the movie had so much fat trimmed off of it that we probably lost some things, but, well, I do think the movie still turned out well in spite of that, so I'd like to see what happens when he comes back. If he comes back. Again, that's not actually confirmed. They're just negotiating at this point. Now, of course, embedded within this statement is also confirmation that the MonsterVerse is definitely continuing. You know, in spite of the fact that it was never actually announced as ending, and we got announcements about that Skull Island anime that's part of the MonsterVerse weeks before Godzilla vs. Kong actually hit theaters and streaming. So, to anyone who thought that the MonsterVerse was going to end with Godzilla vs. Kong, now do you believe me? But anyway, Godzilla vs. Kong is now pretty much confirmed to not be the last MonsterVerse film. They definitely want to move forward. But how are they going to move forward? That's the big question, and that's where I see a lot of people already jumping to conclusions. In the article, it was said that one of the titles being floated around as a potential sequel is Son of Kong. And I'm noticing a lot of people making videos which seem to be leaping over the one of the titles being floated around part and seeing only next movie is Son of Kong, and saying, that's the next movie, definitely confirmed, believe me. Don't believe them. Nothing against them, but don't believe that it's definite, because, again, it's just one of the titles being floated around. That means there are other ideas being floated around, and Son of Kong is just one of them. The Hollywood Reporter, I'm sure, chose that one very specifically because it probably would get attention, and lo and behold, it is. But that's not necessarily the one that's definitely going forward. Of course, the idea for Son of Kong is only slightly younger than the Kong concept itself. Son of Kong was the original sequel to King Kong that was rushed really quickly into production, and by all accounts just didn't live up to the original, thereby leading to a lot of people just choosing to ignore it outright most of the time. However, in terms of how it made sense within that world, the idea of introducing another Kong on Skull Island actually made some degree of sense. Remember, the original King Kong never established that the Kong we see is the only Kong on the island. He's the only Kong we see, and future works that adapted or reinterpreted King Kong made it so that he was the last one, partly because we eventually learned that gorillas are social creatures and seeing a solitary one would be abnormal, but then again we see solitary creatures of every species on the island. We only see one T-Rex, we only see one Brontosaurus, we only see one Stegosaurus, and so on and so on. That doesn't necessarily mean they're all the last of their kind, and no one ever seems to make that assumption. They only make that assumption with Kong. And again, partly that's because of what we learned about gorillas since 1933, but also because it makes Kong's story a bit more tragic. The MonsterVerse, of course, has gone on that idea that Kong is also the last of his kind. From what I understand, the novelization also makes it clear that the Kong we see is definitely the last Kong, and the trailer contained a line saying that both Godzilla and Kong are the last ones standing of the war between their two species. Of course, it's also worth noting that line from the trailer is not actually in the movie. I would know, I've seen the movie 4 times at this point, and I've never heard that line spoken once. And anything in the novelization that's not in the theatrical film can easily be retconned or just plain ignored. If it's not on the screen in this case, then whatever is in the novelization doesn't count. I mean, that's the way it works. So, it is possible that all those allusions to maybe there are other Kongs somewhere in the Hollow Earth could potentially be true. Granted, we didn't see any in there, but then again, we only saw a couple of creatures at a time. The Hollow Earth looks like a very big place in which there could be any number of creatures hiding. But at this point, the implication has always been that Kong, as we see him in the MonsterVerse, is the last of his kind. Which would naturally beg the question, where would this alleged son of Kong come from? And maybe they have an idea, or maybe they're just going to pull something out of their hats, or an area much lower than that. But it's one idea, and that's the thing you got to remember. That's just one idea. There are potentially all sorts of other ideas they're also discussing, some of which might involve Kong, some of which might involve Godzilla, some of which might involve something completely different, maybe Mothra or Rodan, or a brand new monster that they've got the rights to, or an original monster. At this point, they're floating around ideas and they want Adam Wingard to come back. That is all we know for certain. From what I've seen, nothing is said one way or the other about Godzilla's future presence in the MonsterVerse. Of course, he won the battle, and he survives to the end of the movie, so I think it's pretty clear that Godzilla always has the potential to return. We just don't know at this point whether or not he will. People are still acting on the assumption that renegotiations must be done with Toho, and the rights were going to expire after 3 films, which, at this point, I still haven't seen anything that definitely confirms that. I haven't seen anything from Legendary, Warner Brothers, or Toho saying that that was always definitely what the deal was. At this point, I think it's just the lie that's circulated and repeated so many times it became the truth. Whatever. The fact is, Godzilla has the potential to return because he's still there. We just don't know at this point whether or not he actually will. And while Toho still technically has plans to do their own movies again at some point, we haven't really heard much more about that since then. Recently, it seems like what they're more content to do is just license Godzilla out to everyone else and just let them make the stuff for them. They licensed Godzilla to Polygon to make those 3 horrible movies that nobody likes. They licensed Godzilla to Studio Bones to make Singular Point. They licensed Godzilla to Legendary, of course. And they had a successful movie, a movie that could have done better, and a movie that's doing gangbusters. So, I think it would be in Toho's best interest to continue this deal. If indeed the deal is meant to expire, I think it would be a good idea to continue it. And so does everyone else from the look of it. Whether or not that actually happens, I don't know. And of course, I also don't know what the license necessarily would mean in application to Mothra and Rodan, because as far as I know, they are separate licenses, respectively. You gotta pay separate for Rodan, you gotta pay separate for Mothra, you gotta pay separate for Ghidorah and Mechagodzilla, but they had their run. Rodan and Mothra, however, could also still potentially come back. Whether or not they're in the mix, I don't know, but then again, Legendary did recently do something asking, like, the whole retweet if you want this thing regarding a solo Mothra film, and that's getting a lot of action. So it's possible that a future Mothra film could also be in their plan. Again, at this point, we don't know. Son of Kong is just what the Hollywood Reporter settled on. It could be anything at this point. If you see something that's definitely saying it's Son of Kong, that's the next film, confirmed, at least at this juncture, it's not confirmed. So take that with as many grains of salt as you see fit. Bottom line though, at this point the plan is still to continue the MonsterVerse. Deals need to be made, negotiations must be finalized, signatures must be signed, but otherwise, we're moving forward. It might involve Kong, it might involve Godzilla, it might involve Mothra, it might involve all three, it might involve someone completely different, familiar or original. We don't know. All we know is that the MonsterVerse is not over. And I'm sure there are still going to be people out there who insist that it will be, but let them shout into their echo chambers if they want. And you know what? I'm happy that the MonsterVerse is continuing, but I don't necessarily want it to continue for too long. I don't want it to become one of those series that overstays its welcome and just falls into a routine where it's doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. No variety, nothing special to it. It loses its magic and, well, you know, it's like the Showa Godzilla series where it fell into a really bad pattern and by the time it tried picking itself back up with the two Mechagodzilla films, it was too late. Or like the MCU where I recently watched the whole thing again in chronological order and there is a very clear difference between the movies made before Age of Ultron and after Age of Ultron. And I distinctly remember, like, Ant-Man was the first Marvel movie I saw where I came out of the theater thinking, that was okay, didn't really thrill me. And yeah, I gotta say, I haven't really felt that way since. There have been good Marvel movies post Age of Ultron, but as a whole, that latter half of the MCU is very different, and I just don't feel excited for anything that's coming after Endgame. So I don't want the MonsterVerse to wind up like that. I want it to continue, but I want it to have a goal. And I want it to get to a point where they can actually say, this is definitely our finale, we're going to make it the biggest darn finale you ever saw, and have that be a satisfying story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. You know? That's what I want for the future of the MonsterVerse. I don't want it to continue indefinitely. I want it to continue just long enough. And however it continues, I hope Century is as good as what's come before. Anyway, just wanted to clear that up for you. Adam Wingard is in talks to potentially return as the director for the next MonsterVerse movie. The next MonsterVerse movie might be Son of Kong, or it might be something else. Don't believe anyone who says that it's definitely Son of Kong. There you go. That's the update. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.
If you enjoyed what you just saw, hop on down to the description for links to Patreon, DeviantArt, and all of our social media, as well as links for Operation Red Dragon, The Daikaiju Wars Part 1, The Occult Mafia, and Emerald of Maddox City, 3 original novels I think you'll really enjoy. Thank you all, and we appreciate your support.